Why was she always the quiet one when everyone else talked about kills? The fog pressed against the tree line like something alive, thick enough to swallow sound. Alex Reeves stood at the edge of it, boots planted in wet soil, watching the black forest erase the horizon. Somewhere beyond that gray wall, danger waited with patience equal to hers. She felt it the way some people felt a storm in their bones. Not fear, recognition. 8 months. That was how long it had been since anyone had seen her fire her weapon in combat. Not because she couldn't. Because she wouldn't. At 29, she looked unremarkable by design. Average height, lean, no dramatic scars on her face. Her dark hair was braided tight beneath her cap, tucked away like every other part of herself that might draw attention. She moved efficiently, conserving motion the way snipers conserve breath. Her rifle rested against her shoulder with familiarity, not affection. The Mk-13 didn't need affection. It needed discipline. Reeves, Overwatch with Walsh. The voice belonged to Sergeant First Class James Garrison, a man who'd survived wars long enough to stop proving anything. His eyes missed nothing, especially not her. Alex answered without looking up. Copy. Brian Walsh jogged over, younger than the gear he carried, energy still leaking through his professionalism. He grinned like this was all still a story he'd tell someday. "You know the guys started a pool, right?" he said, "on whether you'll ever actually take a shot this deployment." She checked her scope, adjusted the lens, calm. "Focus on your sector," she said, "not other people's bets." The laughter behind them wasn't cruel, just uncertain. Soldiers respected her navigation, her intelligence calls, her discipline, but snipers were measured in moments, and hers had been conspicuously absent. What they didn't know was that silence was intentional. As the patrol moved into the forest, the world narrowed into familiar pieces, angles, wind, shadows that didn't belong. Alex's mind cataloged everything without emotion. This was where she belonged, not in the noise of the squad, but above it, watching, waiting. Through her scope, the forest spoke in small betrayals. A leaf bent the wrong way, a glint where metal shouldn't exist. Her chest tightened. Something wasn't right. She raised a fist. The patrol froze. "Possible recent movement," she whispered into the radio. "Professional." Garrison appeared beside her like a ghost. "You sure?" he asked. "Yes." He studied her face, searching for something unspoken. "You think this is about you?" Alex didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, "I think someone out there remembers me." The radio crackled, then died. Jamming. Her pulse didn't spike. It flattened. This was the moment she'd been avoiding, the moment when hiding stopped working. Gunfire exploded from 3 directions at once. The forest became violence. 14 rangers against at least 50 attackers. Clean formations, perfect angles. Someone had planned this. Someone who understood ranger doctrine as well as they did. Alex dropped behind her rifle. Through chaos, she saw him. Anton Volkov. Older, scarred, familiar in the way nightmares are familiar. He wasn't shooting, he was directing. Brian's voice shook. "They're setting up a machine gun on the ridge, 1,600 meters." Alex tracked the ridge. Her stomach went cold. If that gun came online, everyone down there would die. "No time to call it in," she said. "I'm taking it." Brian stared at her. "That's impossible." She breathed out slowly. "5 impossible shots," she corrected. "Call my wind." Her finger settled on the trigger. The first shot broke the world. She didn't wait to see it land. Bolt adjust, fire. Again. 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 5 rounds in seconds, each one deliberate, each one final. Through her scope, she watched the ridge collapse into confusion. Gunner down, assistant down, loader down, leader down, weapon destroyed. The forest hesitated, as if reality needed a second to catch up. Then everything changed. Alex moved to the next targets, leaders first, then anyone trying to rally. Her shots weren't angry, they were corrective, surgical. Below, Rangers pushed back, momentum shifted, survival returned. She saw Volkov lift his binoculars, saw the recognition bloom across his face. He smiled. Then he saluted. Then he cut his throat with one finger. And disappeared. When the shooting stopped, silence felt heavier than gunfire. Brian finally whispered, "Who are you?" Alex cleared her chamber. "Same as yesterday," she said, "pack up." But the truth was already loose. And it wouldn't go back into hiding. Why did survival feel heavier than victory? The medevac rotors cut through the canopy, scattering leaves and adrenaline alike. Blood stained the forest floor in places that would look ordinary again within days. The Rangers moved with practiced urgency, securing the perimeter, counting heads, accounting for the living. Alex sat apart, breaking down her rifle. Her hands were steady, her thoughts were not. 23 shots, 23 hits. She hadn't missed because she couldn't afford to. Garrison approached, voice low. "You recognized him?" "Yes." "From before?" "Yes." He nodded once. No judgment, just wait. "They'll ask questions." "I know." Command asked more than questions. They asked for her. The Black Hawk arrived without markings, orders above everyone's clearance. Alex went without resistance, not because she agreed, but because running only delayed the inevitable. Inside the mountain facility, ghosts waited. Colonel Marshall was one of them. Alive. Smiling. "Welcome back, Phantom." The name cut deeper than any accusation. Alex didn't salute. "You should be dead," she said. "So should you," he replied calmly. They told her about Volkov's plan, about the conference, about the world leaders, about how her silence had ended the moment she pulled that trigger. "You're the only one who can stop him," Marshall said. Alex stared at the floor, at the reflection of someone she tried not to be anymore. "I'll do it," she said, "but not for you." She named her conditions, her team, her terms. They agreed because they had no alternative. When the Rangers arrived, confusion turned into understanding. Brian didn't joke anymore. Diaz didn't question. Garrison already knew. Preparation followed, brutal, precise, honest. Alex trained them not to become what she was, but to recognize it. At night, sleep didn't come. When it finally did, it brought memories she couldn't silence. Kazakhstan. A shot she'd taken because she'd been told it would save lives. A truth she'd learned too late. Some orders don't end when the trigger breaks. What if stopping him meant becoming her again? Washington gleamed with confidence. Glass, steel, flags in the wind. Alex watched it all through magnification. 800 meters out, clear lines of sight, too many variables. Perfect for Volkov. Her team moved inside the perimeter, invisible among suits and credentials. She listened to their breathing through her earpiece. Familiar, grounding. Then she saw it. A flicker on a distant rooftop. Not a weapon, not yet. Movement that didn't belong. Her heart slowed. "There," she whispered. Volkov wanted her to see him. He always had. Their minds danced the same geometry. Anticipation, counter-anticipation. She knew where he'd shoot from before he did. And she knew he expected her to hesitate. Her finger rested on the trigger. This shot wouldn't be a correction. It would be an ending. She remembered the forest, the Rangers, the blood. She fired. The bullet crossed a city full of unknowing lives and found exactly what it was sent to find. Volkov fell without drama. No salute this time. No message. Just gravity. Silence returned, not the hiding kind, the earned kind. Why did it still feel unfinished? Because endings are rarely clean. Because ghosts don't disappear just because one of them falls. Because Alex Reeves would never be ordinary again, and maybe never had been. But as she disassembled her rifle for the last time that day, she felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Not pride, not triumph. Relief that when the moment came, she chose protection over obedience. That she acted not because she was ordered to, but because people needed her to. Garrison's voice came through the headset. "It's over." Alex closed her eyes. "Yeah," she said, "it is." And somewhere between silence and sound, between hiding and becoming, the world kept turning. Sometimes strength doesn't announce itself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the silence after the gunfire feel louder than the ambush itself? The forest didn't celebrate survival. It never did. It simply absorbed what had happened and waited. Smoke drifted between the trees in thin, lazy strands, carrying the smell of burned powder and torn earth. Alex Reeves knelt behind her rifle, cheek still pressed lightly to the stock, eyes fixed through the scope long after the last hostile shape vanished into the green. Her breathing was steady, too steady. Below her, rangers moved through the aftermath with controlled urgency. Voices were low, orders clipped. Pain was managed, not dramatized. That was how professionals survived, by refusing to let emotion take the lead when chaos tried to take everything else. Alex finally lifted her head. The world rushed back in all at once. Shouts from medics, the metallic clatter of gear, the distant thump of helicopters already inbound. Brian Walsh exhaled loudly beside her, like someone who'd been underwater longer than they realized. "Holy hell," he whispered, not to her but to the idea of what had just happened. They're pulling back." She didn't answer. She was already disassembling the rifle with methodical care, movements precise, ritualistic. Each motion grounded her. If she stayed in the mechanics, she didn't have to think about the bodies on the ridge, or the look on Volkov's face. Especially not the look. Brian watched her hands. He'd seen snipers before. Good ones. Great ones. But this was different. There was no adrenaline tremor, no post-engagement release. Just calm efficiency, like she was packing up after a training evolution. "Reeves," he said quietly, "you just saved everyone down there." She paused, then resumed cleaning the bolt. "They saved themselves," she said. "I just removed the pressure." That answer unsettled him more than anything else. They moved down the slope once the perimeter stabilized. As Alex approached the ranger line, she felt it immediately, the shift. Conversations died when she passed. Eyes followed, not with suspicion, with recalibration. The quiet soldier who never fired had just rewritten the rules of what they thought possible. Master Sergeant Diaz met her near a fallen log streaked with blood. His face was composed, but his eyes were darker than before. "That ridge," he said, "I never saw it." Alex nodded. "You wouldn't have. It was designed not to be seen." Ray stepped in next, gloves soaked red, exhaustion weighing down his voice. "4 of my guys would have been gone if that gun went live." He looked at her, not pleading, not accusing, just honest. "Whatever you did up there, thank you." She met his gaze and held it. This mattered. Not the numbers, not the impossible distances. This. "You did your job," she replied. "That's what saved them." Garrison waited until they were alone. He didn't congratulate her, didn't ask how. He simply said, "You recognized him." Alex didn't deny it. "Yes." "From before?" "Yes." The space between them, filled with years neither of them spoke out loud. "You know what this means," Garrison said. "Yes." "They'll come." "Yes." For a moment he studied her like an old man watching a storm he'd seen too many times. Then, quietly, "I'm glad you were here." She nodded once, that was enough. The extraction came faster than expected. Not just medevac birds, but another helicopter, matte black, unmarked. The kind that didn't belong to patrols or rescues. The kind that arrived when something had gone very wrong or very right. Orders followed, classified, immediate. Alex felt it settle in her chest like cold water. The hiding was over. Brian caught up to her as she slung her pack. "They're taking you, aren't they?" She didn't answer at first, then yes. "For how long?" "I don't know." He hesitated, then asked the question that had been forming since the ridge. "All those months when you didn't shoot, was that because you were ordered not to?" She stopped walking. "No," she said, "because I was afraid of what would happen if I did." That was the truth, or close enough. The helicopter lifted her out of the forest and into something far older than this mission. As the trees shrank beneath them, memory pressed in from all sides. She didn't fight it this time. Montana, snow on concrete, a firing range that never showed up on maps. Project Sentinel. She'd been 23, brilliant, angry, hungry to prove that skill mattered more than politics. Colonel William Marshall had watched her through thick glass, hands clasped behind his back. "We're not here to make soldiers," he'd said. "We're here to make outcomes." The training had been brutal, not just physically. They pushed reaction times past comfort, vision drills that blurred the line between perception and prediction, psychological conditioning designed to strip hesitation from decision-making. It worked. Too well. Anton Volkov had been there too, calculated, cold. They'd pushed each other past records, past safety margins, past humanity if Alex was honest. Kazakhstan had been the breaking point. A shot she was told would prevent 3 attacks, a target she later learned was politically untouchable. The round flew true, the consequences didn't. 3 governments panicked, someone had to disappear. Alex had been buried in a conventional unit, given anonymity like a sentence, told never to make that kind of shot again. She'd obeyed, until the forest forced her hand. The helicopter descended into a facility that didn't officially exist, underground, reinforced, silent. Colonel Harker waited inside, face unreadable. "You made waves today," he said. "I protected my team." "Yes," he replied, "and reminded some people why you were hidden." They brought Marshall in after. Alive, older, still sharp. "Welcome back, Phantom," he said again, like it was a compliment. Alex didn't return it. "You should have stayed dead," she said flatly. "So should Volkov," he replied, "but here we are." They showed her the intelligence, the conference, the pattern. Volkov wasn't just killing, he was signaling, drawing her out. "You're the only one who can stop him," Marshall said. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the old cage closing. "I'll do it," she said, "but not your way." She named her terms, her team, transparency. They resisted, then relented. Because there was no substitute for someone who could see the world the way she did. When the Rangers arrived later that night, confusion gave way to quiet understanding. No one joked. No one asked for war stories. Brian finally spoke when they were alone. "So it's true," he said. "You weren't just trained, you were built." She considered the word. "Yes," she said, "and I spent 8 months trying to pretend I was." He nodded slowly. "I get that." She almost smiled. As preparations began, Alex stood alone in the firing range, rifle laid out before her. Each piece clicked back into place with familiarity that felt like both home and prison. This time, she promised herself, it wouldn't be about proving anything. This time, she would choose why she pulled the trigger. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come from silence. It comes from deciding who you protect when the world finally asks you to show who you are. What if the moment you feared most was the one you could no longer avoid. The city lights looked peaceful from this distance, too peaceful. From her perch high above the streets, Alex Reeves watched traffic slide through intersections like veins carrying unaware lives forward. Washington breathed below her, confident, protected by layers of security and the illusion that order could always be maintained. She knew better. Order was fragile. It only existed because someone stood in the dark, watching for the moment it broke. She lay prone on the rooftop, the concrete still warm from the day's sun, the rifle balanced perfectly beneath her. 800 meters to the primary sightline. A shot most trained snipers could make under ideal conditions. These were not ideal conditions. Wind curled unpredictably between buildings. Heat shimmer rose from asphalt and glass. And somewhere out there, Anton Volkov was waiting, counting on her to hesitate. Perimeter sweep complete, Garrison's voice murmured through the earpiece. Calm, steady, he trusted her. That trust sat heavier than the rifle. Alex adjusted her scope, then paused. For the first time since the forest, her hands weren't entirely steady. Not fear, something worse. Joyce. Below her, the conference center filled with movement. Heads of state, advisors, security teams with earpieces and clipped urgency. The world's future condensed into a few vulnerable hours. She'd been told the stakes, but she didn't need the briefing. Volkov never worked without symbolism. This wasn't about casualties alone. It was about showing how thin the line really was. Brian's voice came next. Crowd density increasing if he fires. He won't, Alex said quietly. How do you know? Because he wants me to watch first, she thought. She scanned the skyline again, slower now. Volkov would choose elevation, oblique angles, a place where the shot felt intimate, not rushed. Somewhere he could disappear after reminding her they were still the same. There. A flicker of movement on a distant rooftop. Not a silhouette, not a weapon, just the wrong kind of stillness. Her pulse slowed. Possible visual, she whispered. Stand by. Time stretched. The city continued, ignorant. She remembered Kazakhstan, how confident she'd been then, how clean the math had looked. She remembered learning afterward that precision didn't guarantee justice. Her finger rested along the trigger guard. Not yet. Volkov wanted her to shoot first, to prove she was still his equal, or his mirror. Through the scope, the flicker resolved into a shape. A man stepping into shadow, moving with deliberate restraint. He raised binoculars, not toward the conference floor but toward her rooftop. Their gazes met across 800 meters of air and consequence. Her breath caught. He knew exactly where she was. Alex felt something unexpected then, not rage, not fear. Sadness. Confirmed, she said calmly, I have him. Take the shot, Diaz urged, clear line. She didn't, not yet. Volkov lifted one hand, slow enough to be unmistakable, a gesture they'd used in training when one of them beat the other to a solution. Acknowledgement. Her chest tightened. This was the loop he'd kept alive for years, the unfinished equation. He wanted her to become what she'd been designed to be, without question, without restraint. Alex, Garrison said, her first name grounding her. We don't need anything else from him. She exhaled slowly. Wind, distance, angle, the shot was there, always had been. This time, she let herself feel the weight of it. She thought of the rangers in the forest, of Brian's question, of the months she'd spent choosing silence because it felt safer than certainty. She thought of all the people below who would never know her name. Her finger moved. The rifle cracked once, clean, controlled, no drama. The round crossed the city faster than sound could follow, threading between currents of heat and chance. Through the scope, Alex saw Volkov's body react before the noise reached him. Surprise, then nothing. He fell backward into shadow, binoculars slipping from his hands like punctuation. No salute. No message. Just gravity reclaiming what ambition had borrowed. She stayed on target, scanning for secondaries. Her breathing steadied again. Training returned, unburdened by doubt. Minutes passed before Garrison spoke. Impact confirmed. No follow-on threats. Below, the conference continued, unaware, uninterrupted. Alex finally eased her cheek from the stock. The city looked the same as before. That was the strange part. The world rarely paused for endings. Brian's voice broke the quiet. "You okay up there?" She considered the question. "I will be," she said. As the team exfiltrated, she took one last look at the rooftop where Volkov had stood. There was no satisfaction waiting there, only closure, and maybe forgiveness for herself. Later, alone in the safe house, Alex disassembled the rifle piece by piece. The familiar ritual no longer felt like a cage. It felt like choice. She wasn't hiding anymore, but she wasn't surrendering either. Somewhere between who she'd been and who she'd tried to forget, she'd found something steadier. Not silence. Purpose. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. What happens after the shot, when the world keeps moving but you do? The safe house was quiet in a way that felt artificial, like silence had been manufactured and sealed into the walls. Alex Reeves sat alone at the small metal table, the rifle laid out in front of her for the third time that night. She didn't need to clean it again. She just needed something to do with her hands while her mind caught up with what her body had already finished. Outside, the city carried on. Sirens in the distance, traffic humming. Somewhere people laughed. Somewhere else, people argued about things that would feel small tomorrow. None of them knew how close the world had come to changing direction with a single breath and a single pull of a trigger. That was always the strangest part. Brian knocked once before entering, as if the door were symbolic rather than necessary. He looked different now, quieter, the kind of quiet that comes from having seen behind the curtain. "They've locked down the area," he said. "Official story is equipment malfunction. No threat, no shooter." Alex nodded without looking up. "That's good." "Is it?" He hesitated, then stepped closer. "You took out a man who's been haunting half the intelligence community for a decade, and no one will ever know." She slid the bolt into place with a soft click. "They'll know," she said. "They just won't say it out loud." Brian leaned against the wall. "How do you carry that?" She finally looked at him. Her eyes weren't cold, just tired. "You don't carry it," she said. "You make room for it, same way you make room for everything else that won't leave." He absorbed that, nodded once, then quietly left her alone again. Hours later, Colonel Marshall arrived. No warning, no escort, just him, standing in the doorway like a past that refused to stay buried. "You hesitated," he said, not as an accusation but as an observation. "Yes." "You could have taken him earlier." "Yes." Marshall studied her the way a craftsman studies a familiar tool, checking for damage, for wear. "But you didn't miss." "No." A thin smile crossed his face. "That restraint, that's new." "It was always there," Alex replied. "You just trained us to ignore it." The air between them tightened. "You stopped a catastrophe," Marshall said. "History will never write your name, but—" "I didn't do it for history," she cut in. Her voice didn't rise, but it hardened. "And I didn't do it for you." He exhaled slowly. "Then why?" She considered the question, longer than he expected. "Because I finally understood what that shot was for," she said. "Not outcomes, not leverage, protection." Marshall said nothing. For the first time, she saw uncertainty flicker across his face. "You're different," he admitted. "Yes," she agreed, "and that's why this ends now." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were details, operations, programs, names, not leaks. Leverage. "I disappear again," she said. "On my terms. My team goes back to their unit. No more phantom. No more shadows you can pull me out of when it's convenient." "And if I say no?" She met his gaze without blinking. Then this doesn't stay in this room. A long silence followed. Finally, Marshall nodded. You've learned how power actually works. Alex stood. No, I learned when not to use it. He left without another word. Dawn came slowly, bleeding pale light into the edges of the safe house windows. Alex stood there, watching the city wake up, feeling something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not peace. Space. Later that morning, she rejoined the Rangers. No ceremony, no speeches, just gear checks and quiet nods. The men didn't treat her like a legend. They treated her like someone who'd been there when it mattered. That meant more than any citation. Garrison pulled her aside before Wheels Up. You could have gone another way, he said. Command would have backed you. I know. But you didn't. No. He studied her, then smiled faintly. I'm glad. As the aircraft lifted, Alex felt the weight she'd been carrying shift, not gone but redistributed. She wasn't trying to erase who she was anymore. She was learning how to live with it. Weeks later, back on a training range far from headlines, Brian finally asked the question that had been waiting. Do you ever wish you never been that good? Alex watched a new sniper struggle with wind calls, remembered being that hungry, that certain. No, she said softly. I just wish someone had taught me sooner that skill isn't the same thing as purpose. The sun dipped low, painting the range in gold. Alex adjusted her cap and turned away, letting the next generation find their own balance. Some lessons can't be taught. They have to be chosen. And for the first time, Alex Reeves felt like she was choosing her life, shot by shot, silence by silence, not because she was built for it, but because she understood it. And that made all the difference. What do you do when the war ends, but the echo of it still follows you? The desert training range stretched out under a washed-out sky, flat and endless, the kind of place where mistakes had nowhere to hide. Alex Reeves lay prone behind the spotting scope, elbows dug into the dust, watching a young corporal fight the wind like it was a personal enemy. Every missed adjustment showed in his shoulders before it showed on paper. Slow down, Alex said calmly. The wind isn't rushing, you are. The corporal exhaled, reset his position, and tried again. This time the round landed closer, not perfect, but honest. Alex nodded once. That was enough. Weeks had passed since Washington. Enough time for the headlines to move on, for the classified reports to be sealed and buried, for the world to pretend nothing extraordinary had happened. For Alex, time didn't move that cleanly. It never had. It layered. Each day rested on top of the last, carrying echoes she hadn't decided what to do with yet. She kept her promise. No more shadows. No sudden black helicopters. She wore standard patches now, slept in regular barracks, answered to normal chains of command. From the outside, she'd become exactly what she was supposed to be. From the inside, she was still learning how to exist without being hunted by purpose. That night she sat alone outside the barracks, boots planted in cool sand, rifle across her knees. She wasn't cleaning it, just holding it, feeling the familiar weight, the balance that had once defined her entire identity. Brian joined her without speaking. He'd learned when silence was the right language. You ever notice, he said finally, how no one asks you about that shot anymore? Alex didn't look up. They don't know how. Or they don't want to, he said. She considered that same thing. He kicked at the dirt, then glanced at her. You regret it. The question wasn't about Volkov, not really. Alex took her time answering. I regret who I was when I thought the shot was the point, she said. I don't regret choosing when to take it. Brian nodded slowly. That sounds healthier than most answers. She almost smiled. Sleep still came in fragments. Some nights she dreamed of the forest, the radio cutting out, the ridge erupting into motion. Other nights it was Kazakhstan again, the version where she didn't pull the trigger, where she spoke up, where things somehow turned out differently. Those dreams hurt more. One evening, Garrison called her into his office. No urgency, no tension. "I'm putting you in for instructor rotation," he said. "Advanced marksmanship, ethics module included." Alex looked up sharply. "Ethics?" He met her gaze evenly. "We teach them how to hit targets. Someone needs to teach them when not to." She felt something tighten, then ease in her chest. "I'll do it," she said. Teaching was harder than shooting. Harder because it required vulnerability, because questions didn't have ballistic solutions, because the young soldiers looked at her with the same hunger she'd once carried, and she had to make sure it didn't consume them the way it almost consumed her. She told them about wind, about patience, about responsibility. She didn't tell them about Volkov, or Phantom, or the shots that still visited her in the quiet hours. Some truths weren't transferable. They had to be earned. Months passed. The rhythm of ordinary service slowly rebuilt her sense of time. She started running again, not to escape thoughts, but to let them arrive and leave on their own terms. She learned to sit through discomfort without reaching for precision as a shield. One afternoon, she received an unmarked envelope in her locker. Inside was a single photograph. Her years younger on a snow-covered range, focused, untouchable, on the back written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. "You chose differently, that matters." No signature. Alex stared at the photo for a long time, then folded it carefully and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't need to know who sent it. The message was enough. That evening, as the sun dropped low and painted the desert in long shadows, Alex stood alone on the range. No students, no observers, just her, the wind, and a single steel target far downrange. She raised the rifle, then lowered it. Some days, the strongest choice wasn't pulling the trigger. It was knowing you still could, and deciding you didn't need to. Alex turned away from the line and walked back toward the lights, carrying her past with her, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. She wasn't finished becoming who she was. But for the first time, she was no longer running from it. What remains when the rifle is finally quiet, and the person you've been running from turns out to be yourself? The rain came in softly that morning, the kind that didn't announce itself but changed everything anyway. Alex Reeves stood just inside the hangar doors, watching the drops darken the concrete in slow, irregular patterns. Somewhere beyond the base, the world was waking up into ordinary problems. Coffee going cold, emails unanswered, promises half kept. It felt distant, not unreachable, just no longer demanding her attention. She hadn't touched her rifle in 3 days. That fact surprised her more than it should have. The weapon sat secured in the armory, logged and locked like any other piece of equipment. No special casing, no private ritual. For the first time in her career, she didn't feel the need to check on it to reassure herself that it was still there, still part of her. The separation wasn't loss, it was space. Garrison approached from behind, boots quiet on the concrete. "Paperwork's done," he said. "Rotation ends today." Alex nodded. She already knew. Still, hearing it out loud made the moment real in a way orders never quite did. "What will you do?" he asked. She thought about it, not defensively, not strategically, just honestly. "I don't know," she said, "and I'm finally okay with that." Garrison smiled, small and unforced. That's usually a good sign. They stood together in silence for a while, listening to the rain. No speeches, no final advice. They said what mattered over years of shared ground and quiet understanding. When he left, Alex stayed where she was. Her phone vibrated once in her pocket. A message from Brian. "You leaving without saying goodbye?" She smiled, typed back. "Already said it, you just weren't listening." A pause. Then fair, stay human, Reeves. She slipped the phone away. The drive off base felt strange. Not dramatic, just unfamiliar. The gate guards waved her through without ceremony, unaware that something fundamental had shifted. The road stretched ahead, wet and reflective, pulling her forward without instruction. For years, every move she'd made had been justified by necessity, by threat, by urgency. Now there was none of that, just open road and time. She pulled over at a small overlook an hour later. No marker, no significance, just a view of hills fading into mist. Alex stepped out, breathed in damp air, and felt something loosen inside her chest. This was what stillness felt like when it wasn't forced. Her thoughts drifted, unanchored for once. Faces surfaced, not the ones she'd neutralized, but the ones she'd served beside. The young corporal finding his rhythm. Brian's half-smile when he realized the world was bigger than doctrine. Garrison's quiet faith. Even Volkov, reduced now to memory rather than shadow. She didn't flinch at his name anymore. That surprised her too. Alex sat on the hood of the car, watching the clouds shift. She thought about all the versions of herself that had existed, each shaped by necessity, each believing they were permanent. Phantom, sniper, instructor, protector. None of them had been lies. But none of them were the whole truth. Later that week, she stood in a different place entirely. A community center, modest, functional, the kind of building people passed without noticing. Inside, a group of veterans sat in folding chairs, coffee cups balanced on knees, eyes wary but hopeful. The facilitator introduced Alex without titles, without history. "This is Alex," she said. "She's here to listen." Alex took a seat. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to control the room. Stories came slowly at first, fractured, defensive, then fuller. A medic who couldn't sleep, a drone operator haunted by pixels, a young woman fresh out of service, afraid that without the uniform she'd disappear. Alex listened. When it was her turn, she didn't tell them about the shots, or the distance, or the things that made her exceptional. She told them about silence, about the fear of being defined by one moment, about learning too late that strength didn't mean absence of doubt. It meant carrying it without letting it decide everything. No one applauded. But when the session ended, no one rushed to leave either. Walking back to her car, Alex felt something settle that had nothing to do with missions or outcomes. It was quieter than pride, deeper than relief. It felt like belonging. Weeks turned into months. Alex found a rhythm that didn't revolve around readiness alerts or threat matrices. She volunteered. She taught. She ran along quiet roads at dawn, letting her thoughts rise and fall without forcing resolution. Some days were heavy. Others were light. Most were somewhere in between. One evening, she received a letter. Handwritten. From a ranger she barely remembered, one of the men from the forest. He wrote about a daughter born healthy, about nights spent holding her, thinking about how close everything had come to ending before it began. "Thank you for being where you were," he wrote. "I don't know how else to say it." Alex folded the letter carefully, placed it with the others she'd kept, not as trophies but as anchors. That night she stood outside under a clear sky, stars sharp and unblinking. She thought about how many times she'd watched the world through glass, through scopes, through layers of distance meant to protect her from consequence. Now the distance was gone, and she was still standing. She didn't miss the shots. She missed the clarity they'd once given her, the illusion that everything could be solved with enough precision. But she understood now that life didn't work that way. Most things worth protecting didn't announce themselves as targets. They just existed, waiting. Alex Reeves wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't a myth, or a weapon, or a ghost someone else could summon when convenient. She was a woman who had learned what her hands were capable of and had chosen how to use them. The world would never know her name. And that was fine, because dignity didn't need witnesses. It didn't raise its voice or demand recognition. Sometimes it simply acted. And then quietly, it learned how to live.